Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Been a little while since I've last been on this channel, as per usual. I know last time I made a video, which was my review for The Flash Season 9, Episode 1, I did make a very definitive and distinct promise that I was going to review every single episode of The Flash Season 9, leading up to, its finale and its conclusion and the end of the Arrowverse as a whole. But of course, in typical DC Central fashion, that did not come to fruition. And we are now 10 episodes into the new season, and I've only reviewed the first episode. But I really wanted to get on camera and talk about this season because it has been a roller coaster ride. And this video is going to be, I don't quite know how I'm going to edit this yet. It's probably going to be pretty long form. It's going to be me just kind of chatting, but I just kind of want to get on camera and talk about this season and what an experience it has been so far. So if you saw my review for the first episode of Season 9, you'll know that I was relatively positive on that first episode, although my main complaint with it was that it really felt like a filler episode. It really felt like a really strange episode and a strange story to kind of kick off with a new season, and particularly the final season of the show and the final season of the Arrowverse, to kick off with an episode like that felt very strange and kind of weird. But hey ho, it's the first episode, let's see how the rest of the season gets on. Now, when it comes to the rest of the season, it's interesting that that first episode felt like filler because so has the rest of this season. And I'm just going to jump straight into it. Like, this season for me has felt so disconnected and so full of filler. How is this the final season? Like, how is this the type of episodes that we're getting in the lead up to the end of this show? Like, have they just truly ran out of ideas by this point? Because it's really baffling to me, coming off of Season 8, which was quite good to be fair, the fact that we are now going into Season 9 and they're just drip feeding us with these really weak, strange storylines that nobody cares about. And I just don't really get how that's happening when we've literally had so many seasons in the past which have had filler episodes but still had like a core storyline going through. This season hasn't felt like that. This season has just felt like a bunch of random stories with like some very thin through lines. And that has just been a strange decision for the final season of this show. And besides episode 9, which I'm going to do a whole thing on episode 9, I'll talk about that in a bit. Besides episode 9, everything else has just felt really kind of superfluous and weird, which is, again, it's baffling to me. It's a bizarre choice for this final season. Now, like a lot of previous seasons of The Flash, there has been a big focus this season on a lot of the side characters, which, again, is an issue when this is the final season. I want the focus to be on Barry. I want the focus to be on him as the Flash. I want him and his journey to get a true, proper conclusion. And this season has felt like, again, we're just dilly-dallying between different characters. There's been a lot of focus on Chester and Allegra, and particularly the one that's really annoyed me has been Cecile. Cecile, although she's been a character that's been on the show for many years at this point, what they've done with her character I find utterly bizarre. The fact that her and Joe are kind of at this point now where, they're getting older, and Joe, played by Jesse L. Martin, he left the show in this season. Like, even though this is the final season, he's not in this season as much as he has been in other seasons because he's moving on to a different show. But, the reason why Joe left is because he's like, well, we're getting old and we've got a baby. We shouldn't be doing this sort of thing. And the decision that the writers came to, rather than just give Cecile a normal sort of ending and make her go off with Joe, which is what was the logical thing, they made Joe and Cecile come to the conclusion of, oh, well, Joe and the baby will go out of Central City and they'll leave the city and go somewhere else. Cecile, you can stay with Team Flash and continue doing all the superhero stuff, and that's fine. And then you can come see the baby on the weekends, like it's some kind of divorce. I don't understand how they've come to... I understand loyalty to actors and stuff, and, perhaps the actress who plays Cecile, I know she's a series regular, and, if Jesse wanted to leave the show early to go do another thing, that's fair enough. Actors still have to work and stuff. So I get that, but surely there could have been a better way of writing that than just having Cecile and Joe come to this conclusion of, we're just going to separate, not relationship-wise, but we're literally going to separate in location, and that's it. And, Joe has been sporadic in the season, like I say, because he's not really in this season properly. I'm sure we'll see him again before the end, but it's just a very, very strange storyline. And there's also another side character who I want to talk about who has completely this kind of completely sums up like the issues of this season, is Keone, played by Danielle Panabaker. Now, Danielle Panabaker, of course, has played Caitlin Snow, Killer Frost on this show since, well, even before season 1. She was obviously in Arrow beforehand as well, doing all the backdoor pilot stuff. So Danielle Panabaker has been like a key core member of this cast from the very, very, very beginning. She's one of the only OGs we actually have left outside of like Barry and Iris. And to see what they've done with Caitlin's character, or not Caitlin's character, has been really, really bad to see. Honestly, I hate it. Everything to do with Keone, despite the fact the character's okay, what's the point? Why are we giving a whole new character in this final season? This season should be about, wrapping up all the stories of the previous characters. And, we lost Killer Frost in season 8, and that's fine. But Caitlin was still around, technically. So the fact that in between season 8 and 9, they killed Caitlin off screen and brought in this new character of Keone, I just don't get it. I don't understand it. And this character, she's not, she doesn't have that relationship with everyone else because it's not Caitlin, it's not Killer Frost, she's something else. She seems to have powers of some description, but they are kind of like these more elemental-based powers, it seems, or based in nature, is something that Oliver said in episode 9, like something to do with like nature and nurture. I don't know. I realize I have very little structure to this video. I'm kind of just rambling, but Keone is just an absolute mess of a character, in my opinion. I don't see the point. I don't understand why we had to kill Caitlin off. I don't understand why we had to go through this whole story, because the only reason, like the only thing killing Caitlin off and giving us Keone did was kind of progress Mark Chilblain as a character. But why are we focusing on Chilblain over Caitlin? A character who's been here since season 1 versus a character who's been here since, season 7 or 8? I can't remember when Chilblain was introduced. I think it might have been 8. So why are we focusing on this character and not this character? Baffling to me. And then the other thing to talk about, before I get to episode 9, is the Red Death storyline. Now, there was a lot of hype going into the Red Death arc, of course. Like, on this channel, we've all spoken about the Red Death for many, many years. This is a character we've wanted to see for a while. And we were always curious, how are you going to do Red Death on this show? Because they can't do it exactly the same way as it is in the comics, because that would involve getting Bruce Wayne, and we can't get Bruce Wayne or Batman, so how are we going to do it? So they decided to go down the route of going with Batwoman instead, which I think makes a lot of sense. We have Batwoman in the Arrowverse, why not? And it is, in terms of comic accuracy, it's probably the closest option we'd have. The problem with the Red Death storyline, it just wasn't very good. This was the first kind of new speedster villain we've had in a while. Season 8 gave us some cool speedster stuff, but that was mostly with Thorn and stuff like that. But this was like our first new kind of mystery speedster villain that we had in a long time. And I was really excited about that. And it just fell completely flat, despite the fact that I think the suit looked really good. I really liked the Red Death costume, apart from like the fins, like the ears, the wings. I didn't really like them. They looked very cheap and fake, but the rest of the suit looked very, very good. This arc just felt completely redundant. Like, it felt like we'd done it before. It just involved getting like all of these rogues in who weren't really that cool or that interesting. They were just trying to, again, it was kind of more so all just to service Chilblain. Again, why are we focusing so much on Chilblain? I mean, I don't even hate Chilblain as much as a lot of people do. Like, I think his character's fine, but the fact that he was getting so much priority is what annoys me. So going into this Red Death arc, when he is getting all this focus based on these other kind of weak characters and then this Red Death villain, it just didn't really feel like much to me. And then the reveal that the character was, of course, Javicia Leslie as Ryan Wilder, like an alternate Earth Ryan Wilder. I mean, cool reveal, and again, it was kind of what was the most logical conclusion to do, was to make it Batwoman. I'm sorry, but Javicia Leslie as the villain, I mean, I like Javicia Leslie, I think she's a cool actress, I liked her on Batwoman, but I don't know if this was her or the direction, but she just goes for it in this, and not really in a good way. There's kind of just no control over her emotions, and I know that she's trying to play like a psychotic villain. The Red Death in the comics is like a mass murderer, So I get that kind of aspect of it, but it kind of just came across a little bit more cringe. And I don't like using that word because I think there's too much negative connotation that comes with the word cringe. But I can't lie, like I genuinely did cringe watching her scenes when she was like unmasked. And that's a shame because again, I really like Ryan Wilder as a character. I thought she was great on Batwoman, and you know, with this season kind of serving as an end to the Arrowverse as a whole, this was kind of our conclusion to Batwoman. Like, obviously it was cancelled, so this was kind of like our conclusion to that. So to have Javicia Leslie kind of play like a weaker character, even though we do see the regular Ryan Wilder at the very, very end, it was just a little bit, I don't know, maybe disappointing. Especially I can imagine for Batwoman fans, like this is kind of like the conclusion to that story. So yeah, the Red Death arc was just not great. And it's just some of like the line deliveries and stuff. Like they did the Michael Keaton "Let's get nuts" line, you know, which is a fun little callback, but it didn't work. So yeah, I think everything basically leading up to episode 9 of this season was just filler, drivel, not interesting, and it hurts me to be so negative because, you know, I think I've always been known in this community as being a little bit more positive, and you know, I've always had a more positive spin on things, and I love this show. But this season has just not been it. And I think that as a final season, it's just been an absolute waste of time. And it's really disappointing. And obviously, we've not finished yet. We're only 10 episodes in. I've actually not seen episode 10 as of recording this. So I'm not going to mention episode 10 in this video because I've not seen it. I kind of wanted to talk about episode 9 before we talk about anything else. But yeah, so far, like the first 9 episodes minus episode 9 has just been weak. But all that negativity out of the way, let's talk about episode 9. Now, this was easily the episode I was most looking forward to this season, for obvious reasons. This episode titled "It's My Party and I'll Die If I Want To" just had my name written all over it. As someone who is a lifelong Arrow fan and whose favourite show of all time is Arrow, all eyes were on this episode for me because this was essentially our last ever bit of Arrow content that we will ever get. And before we talk about the Arrow stuff, let's just talk about the other stuff that was in the episode. I mean, for one, this episode was Barry focused. Thank you. Like, this episode was revolving around his birthday and obviously the fact that in season 8 he lost a few years, so he's kind of catching up. So that focus on Barry was nice. Again, he still isn't like the real center, which is, I mean, in this episode, I don't mind it as much. And I realize that's completely subjective because of how big of a fan of Arrow I am. I just really hope in these last 4 episodes, we really get like a true proper focus on Barry. But he's a bit more central here, which was nice. We also had Keenan Lonsdale return as Wally West, Kid Flash. Great to see him. Always fantastic to see Wally. And I absolutely loved his story in this. You know, something that has come up like a few times with Wally in the Arrowverse is that he's a very much like an ignored character. He's a character who people don't tend to pay much attention to, and I'm talking character-wise, not like fan-wise. You know, it's the reason why he left the show originally and went over to Legends was because the Team Flash literally were ignoring him and not noticing him. And obviously Wally's kind of always had this kind of laying bitterness for Barry because even though him and Barry, they're kind of like brothers now and they love each other, there is kind of this like resting hatred almost a little bit where, you know, Wally kind of feels like Barry took his life, which is very warranted. And the fact that they really delved into that with Wally in this episode was great. And Keenan Lonsdale played it great. Like, we've not seen him since season 6, so it was really nice to see him again. He's such a great member of this cast, and I really did want to see him like one more time before the show ended, so that was really nice. I wish they would have given him a new suit. It's kind of weird that they've never given Wally a new suit at all. He's had the same suit since season 3. But hey-ho, I guess they weren't going to spend all that money for like one episode. And we also got to see like Dark Kid Flash, which was fun. Like, obviously when when Barry got possessed by Bloodwork in season 6, he was like Dark Flash. So we got Dark Kid Flash in this, which was fun. And then obviously Bloodwork as well. Bloodwork returned. Senthil Ramamurthy came back to portray Ramsey Rosso, and he's great. Ramsey is probably one of the best villains we've had on the show. Like, he's not quite up there with like Thorn and Zoom, but I'd say he's like probably just below them. up there with the likes of like maybe like Savitar, maybe a little bit better than Savitar actually. Yeah, I'd say he's better than Savitar. Cool villain though, very cool villain. I really like him, and he just plays the villain like so well. And seeing him really delve into like what makes Barry tick, particularly what makes Wally tick, was really interesting. And the way he was actually able to turn Wally against everyone was fun. And he kind of took everyone, all the rest of the team out like that. So it was kind of Barry and Wally on their own. Was great. And another character we had show up in this episode was, of course, John Diggle, my boy John Diggle. Now, to be fair, Diggle is the one character post-Arrow who's kind of been showing up here and there. Like, he did like an Arrowverse victory tour after Arrow ended, where he showed up on an episode of The Flash, Legends, Supergirl, Batwoman. Like, he kind of showed up on all of them. And he's also been on Superman and Lois, which has been very confusing given the fact that everything that's been going on with Superman and Lois and being a part of the Arrowverse and not a part of the Arrowverse. But point is, you know, John Diggle has been around in the Arrowverse since Arrow has ended, so we haven't missed him quite as much, but it doesn't change the fact that I love David Ramsey, I love him as Diggle, so I will never turn down an opportunity to see him, and he's great here once again. Always great to see him. He's got a great relationship with Barry. You know, I love the fact that the birthday present he got Barry was Oliver's bow, like his original bow, which was, like you said, it was found in like the remnants of National City, which is obviously like the fallout from the Crisis on Infinite Earths fight where he died. Really cool, really like that. And Diggle's just great. Every time he shows up, it's awesome. Now, all those other characters coming into this episode was great, but the real reason why we were all excited for this, especially me, was the return of the GOAT, the original, the catalyst of the Arrowverse, Mr. Oliver Queen himself, played by Stephen Amell. And what a treat this episode was. What a absolute treat this episode was. Especially as an Arrow fan, I couldn't have been happier. And what I really didn't see coming from this episode was this gave me a more satisfying conclusion to Arrow and Oliver's story than Arrow Season 8 did. And obviously, I have a very hot take, which is well known at this point. I don't love Arrow Season 8. I think it was a bad final season. I think it was a bad ending to the show. But this actually gave me some things that I wanted from Arrow Season 8. Not everything. There are still some big problems I have with Season 8 that still stand. But this episode was able to heal a little bit of those issues. And that, to me, means the world. But anyway, I'll get onto that. But Stephen Amell, you know, without Stephen, without Oliver, without Arrow, we wouldn't have the Arrowverse. We wouldn't have The Flash. And obviously, Stephen Amell, like as an actor, he's one of my favourite actors. He's a guy very close to my heart. Like you can sort of see in the background there. That's a photo of me and Stephen there. Got a statue of Oliver over there. A statue of Barry as well. This guy means the world to me. So just, you know, seeing him on screen again, it just filled my heart with so much joy. And he doesn't even really come into the episode until about halfway in, but he's really, like, once he's in it, he, like, dominates the entire episode. And it's fantastic to see that because, you know, I saw a lot of people complain about the fact that, oh, maybe we shouldn't have had such a focus on Oliver, like, this is the final season of The Flash, it should be Barry, blah, 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 blah. And to a degree, I agree with that because that is what I said about Arrow Season 8. Like, the fact that the focus was on, like, the spin-offs and Crisis rather than the actual show itself. And that was my big complaint. But as a fanboy and as a subjective person, I love this episode and the focus it was on Oliver. It was great. And the way that they actually introduced Oliver really shocked me because I was, you know, there was a big question of, well, how are they going to bring Oliver back? Because obviously the last time we saw him, he died. He was the Spectre, blah, 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 blah. How are we going to get to that? So the fact that they have Wally just outright kill Barry, insane. And it isn't like a thing where it's like, oh, there was a way around it or this. No, he straight up killed Barry. Like, he straight up phased through his heart and killed him. Barry was dead. Wild. Crazy stuff. And as soon as he died, that's when in my head I went, here's how we get to it. And Barry, of course, then shows up in the afterlife where Oliver resides. And this was great because the afterlife where he ended up was on Lian Yu, So we got to see Lian Yu again. Like, we got to see Lian Yu again. That was so cool. And obviously, there's kind of like a deeper meaning to that as well, because obviously Lian Yu, it means purgatory in Mandarin. So it's kind of like, the space in between heaven and hell. And that's where he went, and that's where Oliver was. Really cool. And we get our first little scene between Stephen and Grant. And their chemistry is some of the best in the Arrowverse. Like, there's a reason why the crossovers are always so much fun. And it was because Stephen and Grant, as Barry and Oliver, were just great together, and they are awesome here. Like, their little reunion is awesome. The boop line and Oliver punching him in the face to bring him back to life was great. The fact that we get like little elements of the Arrow music here and there just speak to my heart, and seeing Stephen just on screen again, it was just fantastic. It was amazing. And best of all, which I loved, is the fact that Oliver, he brings Barry back to life, and then he brings himself back to life. Incredible. Because, I thought they were going to find some really strange roundabout way to kind of bring Oliver back into the fold, because we knew he was in this episode, but, to what degree and how. But the fact that they just, they bring in this rule of Oliver saying as the Spectre, he can only get involved if the multiverse is in danger. And this is where it leads to, the reveal of, the multiverse is still there, it's still a thing. Red Death wasn't, from an alternate timeline, she was actually from an alternate Earth. And Oliver's been going around the different Earths, naming them and stuff. But Oliver is able to come back to life because he can get involved, because the multiverse was in peril, the multiverse was in danger. And I loved that, because it just meant we could actually physically have Oliver alive again, even for a little bit. And I loved that. So yeah, the way they actually brought Oliver back was way better done than I thought it was going to. I thought it was going to be really messy and really weak. But actually, fair dues to the writers. They actually did it in a really compelling and interesting and real way. The fact that he was in the afterlife, that's how we get to him. And then he comes back to life in order to stop this threat, because it involves the multiverse. Love that. But when he does come back, he shows up in his season 8 Green Arrow suit, which that suit's just phenomenal. I forgot how good it was. It's probably the best suit Oliver ever had. It's one of the best suits in the Arrowverse. He just looks phenomenal in it. And when he comes back, he has a really awesome fight scene with these security guards. And I have to give credit to this fight scene, because you can really tell that the people and the guys working behind the scenes on this, they really tried to replicate the Arrow cinematography and the Arrow fight choreography, because Arrow's fight scenes were obviously very different to the Flash. Arrow's was very hand to hand, it's very grounded, it's this, that, and the other, whereas Flash is a bit more superpower based and CGI. So the fact that they really made the effort to kind of give Stephen this big fight scene, this final fight scene with him, where he was taking on all these SWAT guards, it was great. And I don't think it was amazing. It was certainly not as good as the fight scenes on Arrow, and and I'm not going to complain too much about that, because again, we got an amazing final fight scene with Oliver in the Arrow series finale. That was phenomenal. We definitely could have got Bam back to direct this episode, but I digress. I think the fact that they just gave us a fight scene with Oliver really was great. And again, it really felt like an Arrow fight scene. Like I say, it wasn't quite as good, it wasn't quite there, but they really tried their best to kind of give us something on a similar level, and I only can respect that. So that fight scene was fantastic. And that fight scene ends with Diggle coming into the scene to have his reuniting with Oliver. And see, this is where I'm going to get into the healing part of this, because a huge issue I have with Arrow Season 8 is the fact that Oliver died and Diggle wasn't there. Now, I'm not going to go into this because I've got a whole half-an-hour video on Season 8 where I rant about this full on, so if you want to see my full thoughts, go check out that video. I'll leave a link in the description. But the fact that this episode actually gave us that reunite between Oliver and Diggle, I can't be thankful enough for that. Seeing Diggle actually see Oliver for the first time again, and the look on his face, he just can't believe the fact that his brother in arms is back in front of him. And again, this wouldn't have worked had Oliver not been back to life. If they'd done it some other way and it didn't quite feel the same, I don't think it would have come off with the same effect. But the fact that he is looking across the street and he can just see Oliver there, it breaks him. And it broke me as a viewer. And, you know, they go over there and they have a hug and it's amazing. And then we get this fight scene with Diggle, Oliver, Barry, and Wally all together fighting Bloodwork. And it's just everything I wanted it to be. It's everything I wanted it to be. It really felt like the last proper crossover we're ever going to get. Even though it wasn't like a full crossover event, it was just one episode. It felt like the sort of crossover that I didn't know we were going to get in this final season. And that was amazing. It was amazing. Wonderful. And they couldn't have ended it in a better way. They have Ramsey Rosso kind of dead to rights, and Oliver gets his bow. He has this like special arrow to take him out, and we get one final time. We get Ramsey Rosso, you have failed this city. Oh, so good. And, you know, going back to the Crisis crossover, you know, we kind of got one final version of it in there with Oliver as the Spectre saying to the Anti-Monitor, like, you have failed this universe. And I like that line. I know a lot of people don't. I personally liked it, but it certainly didn't have like the same punch and the same effect of you have failed this city, because that's what Oliver has always said. So to have him finally, one final time, have someone dead to rights and say you have failed this city, I was punching the air. I mean, you can see just the look on my face now and the excitement. It was just so good. It was so satisfying to hear that one last time. And I love that. Now, moving away from the fight scene, we kind of go back to this kind of birthday party with Barry, and the whole cast is there, and even Oliver is at this party. And this scene was everything to me. Everything. Because we get one final scene between Oliver and Diggle. And like I said, this scene particularly is the one that really healed me, because Diggle was never there when Oliver died. He didn't get to see him. And they do talk about this in the crossover. Like, Diggle does say, you know, he died twice and I wasn't there. You know, I'm his right-hand man, I'm his brother, I should be there, and he wasn't. And I think that was a massive mistake on the writer's part. So the fact that Oliver and Diggle got this reunion, and in this particular scene, just got to talk to each other as brothers again, it was everything to me. It was so emotional. You really felt the love between Stephen and David. You know, these two love each other, and you can feel that. And what really broke me is, you know, you have these two talking, and they're talking about each other's families, and, you know, there's little references to, you know, both of their families from Arrow, and that was lovely. We get a reference to Felicity, all that stuff. But it's the fact that they have one final hug, a goodbye hug, which they never got to have. Like, that's the thing, they never got to say goodbye to each other. They never got to say goodbye. So to go to this episode where they finally got to say goodbye and hug each other for the last time, I couldn't be happier with it. And the line, you know, Oliver just says, "I love you, John." It literally, I was crying. I was crying. Especially because I've seen a lot of people say that it seems as if Stephen maybe improv that line, because the way it comes off is so genuine, and it feels very ad-lib. Like, a lot of people are predicting that maybe wasn't actually in the script. We don't know that for sure, but the way Stephen played it, it was just so genuine. It's like he literally just came out with it. And him just saying, "I love you, John," and like, "I love you too, man," in that final hug together, and in our final scene with them two, it genuinely healed my heart, because they finally got to say goodbye. They finally got to say goodbye. And, you know, even though I've not loved this season so far, and I was saying all that bad things about it before, the fact that I will always be thankful to this season because it gave us this episode, and in particular this scene. It healed something in me that was broken from the end of Arrow, and I can't be more thankful than that. And, you know, I sound really dramatic. I'm aware of that. Like, I sound really dramatic talking about this, but, you know, this is what I do. I couldn't be more thankful to Eric Wallace and the team for providing us with this episode just because of that scene alone. And I loved it. Now, the episode ends with an incredible little scene between Barry and Oliver before Oliver says goodbye to Barry and the universe and us forever. We get one final bar scene between the two where they're having a drink, talking about stuff, and, you know, Barry's kind of talking with Oliver about the multiverse and saying the fact that, you know, how many other Flashes are there out there and stuff like that, and just some fun dialogue about the multiverse. But then we get like one final little conversation, which is an amazing callback to the Flash pilot, where, you know, Barry says, you know, how do I know I'm doing enough? How do I know that I'm good enough? How do I know that, you know, I am the hero that I'm meant to be? And Oliver just turns around and looks at him and says, Barry, that lightning bolt chose you. Don't you ever forget that. And that's an amazing callback to the pilot where Oliver said to Barry, I think that lightning bolt chose you. It was an amazing little line from like the GOAT of the Arrowverse to say to Barry before he left. And in this scene, you have like little pieces of the Arrow music flaring up, which music is like a big thing for me, particularly the Arrow theme. Like to hear that really gets me emotional now. So to hear him say that with that music, it just got me. It completely got me. And he finally says goodbye, and he leaves. And it couldn't have been better done. It couldn't have been better performed. It couldn't have been better written. Like, this was everything we wanted from this episode. Not only did we get great scenes with Oliver and a reunion with Diggle, but this final little scene between Barry and Oliver really, for me personally, is the conclusion to the Arrowverse. If this was the final episode of The Flash and the final episode of the Arrowverse as a whole, honestly, I'm satisfied. Because in my opinion, this scene, this final scene between Barry and Oliver, is the Arrowverse coming full circle. We have Oliver back, we have Barry back, and it all, you know, concludes with a callback to the very first, like, scenes of them together in the Flash pilot. In my opinion, that is the Arrowverse coming full circle. Now, obviously, we've still have got 4 more episodes to go, and that's going to wrap up the Flash properly, hopefully. But like I say, if this was the final episode, I genuinely would be happy. I'd be happy with this. Even though it might have felt like a bit of a weak ending for the Flash, this, to me, like, the core of the Arrowverse, it's Oliver and Barry. It really is. So them two having that moment, it just meant the world. And again, I think that it could have been the end of the Arrowverse. This could have been the end of it. So, yeah. That's kind of my thoughts on episode 9 as a whole. Like I say, I didn't really expect this to be like a full-on review of episode 9, but hey-ho. I love this episode so much, and I can't wait to watch it again. I might rewatch it before I watch episode 10, just because it's so special. But yeah, episode 9, like I say, for season 9, this season has not been great. I'd maybe go as far to say it's the worst season of The Flash. I'll say, you know, I'll save that thought until the season's over, but it's looking that way. But it did give us this episode, and that I'll be forever thankful for. So this video's gone on long enough, so I'm going to try and bring it to a close. Obviously, looking ahead, we have got the last 4 episodes of season 9, which is going to be the final, final arc, like the final comic book arc, which, you know, Eric Wallace has kind of split up the season into arcs, as he always does. And this final arc is going to give us our last time with Reverse Flash and Thorn. Like, we know that Matt Letcher's coming back for episode 10. That's great. And also, this is where Eddie Thorne is finally going to come in, and we're finally going to get Cobalt Blue, a character we've wanted in the Arrowverse for years. So I'm very excited to see that, see how they handle Cobalt Blue and how they actually do him. But overall, like I say, this season, it's been a weak final season, I'm afraid. I just don't think it's stuck the landing. I think it's just been full of filler, full of weak stories, weak character moments, and not enough Barry focus. Too much focus on random side characters. Like, I forgot to even mention, they brought Becky Sharp back in this season. Why? But it did give us episode 9. And that is amazing. And almost, for me personally, as a fanboy of Arrow, almost makes this season worth the price of admission alone. But what do you guys think of season 9? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Like, tell me how you've been feeling about this season, because it seems like overall, you know, in the fan base, the kind of overwhelming feeling is that this season has been pretty negative, which I completely understand. So again, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. What do you think of Flash season 9? And are you looking forward to these last sort of last 4 episodes of the season? Just let me know whatever you think about the season. And also, how did you feel about episode 9? Just drop it in the comments down below. And if you want to see more DC content like this and more comic book, fun, movie, TV content, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you know when I actually upload. And I hope to see you guys again in my next video.